But it had been quite a while since there had been a show here in Maine, so we jumped on the chance to put on this exhibition to share Marlene's rich and philosophical body of work. Just a few words about format. You can ask questions by typing them in the comments section. There's a bit of a delay between the Facebook Live feed and us here in the gallery. So I encourage you to go ahead and type questions as you have them. Otherwise, if everyone waits until the end, we may not get to or see all of your questions. And with that, I turn things over to Adam, Alex, Kevin, and Robert. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I guess I'll introduce myself first. So my name is Alex Gerberick. So I am the youngest of 3 sons, Marlene and Clarence. And I live here in Portland now. And actually, I lived in Bath with my parents after I finished up college. So I got a chance to, my mother had a studio at first in the home in Bath before moving to a studio right above Rennie's in downtown Bath, which she had for about 25 years. And that really became her sanctuary. So I got a chance to really kind of experience that, but from a son standpoint and not necessarily from an artist standpoint. So my goal here is just to try to add insight into Mom, Marlene, the person, and my brother Adam will also kind of do that. And then we have Kevin and Roderick who will kind of give some more insight into Marlene, the artist. So.
I'm Adam, and all the things that Alex just said, and my sort of personal contribution is I feel sort of blessed that from my dad, who was very technically oriented and logical minded, I got some capability with computers. And from my mother, of course, I got a bit of an eye, just a little bit of an eye, and I'm a graphic designer down in Boston now. And so it's wonderful that the gallery is hosting this exhibit, and we're looking forward to talking about it.
I met Marlene.
Kevin, we agreed you're going to say Marlene.
Anyway, I met her, so long ago, I can't even remember exactly when. I worked in a frame shop and sold art supplies. I was a graduate of an art college, and I met her and was immediately fascinated. And over time encountered her work, and then went to her studio, had many important philosophical conversations, and her work deeply affected me. And it affected many artists who went there and saw the work.
And I met her through Kevin, of course, and then we became friends. But when I went for the master's program at Mecca, when it had first started, they had advisors that you had off campus. And the second year, which would have been 99, they came to me and said, "We have no clue who to get yet. Do you have any ideas?" And I'm going, "Well, I'm interested in assemblage, putting these things together." Yes. And so I said, "I'm not going to ask her, you being the college, please, do the facilitating." And she was thrilled to be on board. She hadn't done that in quite a while, so she took it as a nice challenge. And so I got to know her both from a personal and then a professional edge on things. And, she was always a professional, period. Off or on, whether it was, related to school or not. She had a wonderful, precise, professional attitude to things. And listening to her, as I said to you guys at one time, she had a very soothing tone to her, so she made you very calm. And at the same time, you had to pay attention because there were all these marvelous little nuggets that would come out periodically. So you just listened, and again, it gave you this wonderful sense of calm where you were getting excellent input into things, is all I can say for that. So.
Nice. Fantastic. Yeah. Well, I wonder if, I think we thought that at this point we would try and just give a little bit more of an understanding of mom, Marlene, the artist. And, I wonder if we could, I was mentioning to you guys when we were talking previously about how I'm spending a lot more time sort of processing who Mom was as an artist. One of the things I really wanted to ask you about, and I think that this sort of like helps sort of like set the stage as to who Marlene was as an artist, are the sort of phases of her work that she went through. And when Alex and I were growing up in New York, in a small town in New York, she was working in drawing and graphite on paper, and I remember seeing works that she had done before that as a student that were very sort of kind of geometric, abstract works, and right there's a big difference between those two styles. And sort of in the back of my mind was always like what drove like that change in style. And then some point when we were roughly in high school, late 70s, early 80s, she transitioned over from that graphite on paper to acrylics, large paintings like the ones behind you guys. And I'm just curious about whether she ever spoke about that sort of like development in her as an artist. Like those are very different media, and like did she talk with you guys about what drove that?
She did. She talked to me a lot about it.
Yeah.
She was determined to make her name for herself as an artist, and she took it very seriously. Mm-hmm. And when she went to school, she was very ambitious. She
Mm-hmm.
came out, she was quite ambitious. And she wanted shows in New York, and she was paying attention to the things that were going on around her, and she was trying to make a name for herself. And I think at that time, she indicated to me that your father was doing a similar thing. He was ambitious, he was working really hard,
Mm-hmm.
and at a certain point, Marlene and the two of them, Marlene and Clarence, wanted to give up the rat race.
Huh.
They felt they were in a bit of a rat race.
Mm.
And I also think that Marlene had a major breakthrough by delving into her grandmother's, her grandmother's legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Her Finnish grandmother, whose name was
Taavaniina.
Taavaniina.
Yeah.
And that, she didn't, at that point, I don't think she cared what anybody thought about what she was doing. She was on fire. She was off. She no longer had to worry about what gallerists thought or what she was doing for her career. She didn't care.
Oh, that's so interesting.
She was really focused on this. And because of that, she began to gain attention, and especially from the Finns. The Finns were very, very interested in what she was doing. And she also had this relationship with the College of Finlandia,
Yes.
which she always
Yeah.
had.
In the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Right.
Yeah.
So this was a thing that evolved naturally, and then it became very strong and very intense, and she never looked back. And she started drawing again when she broke her foot.
Yes, yes.
And then, and so she would go back, go back and forth, but there was never any doubt. She was not a person who had any doubt about what she was doing in the art.
I so remember her talking about the hard work, the kind of painful work, frankly, of taking her portfolio down to Manhattan and walking the streets of Soho to gallery after gallery trying to find work. And so for you to add a little bit of color to that, that's, I certainly knew those facts, but I never heard my mom or my dad really speak about ambition. I think that that's probably something that they felt very privately about.
Yep.
Yeah. The only time I can remember Mom talking anything about that was she had, it was an exhibit, and it was mostly drawings. I think it was all drawings. And she gave a talk about it. And I remember her saying, the one part of her talk that stuck with me is that she had done a drawing of a bird's nest, and it's a wonderful drawing, just very exquisite. And she said she was doing things like that to prove to people that she had that skill. I can do this. Look at me. I can draw. And that was the first time that I really had heard her say, I'm going to show you, which is kind of that ambition that you're talking about.
And the other thing is, I think her emphasis kept moving more and more and more toward the natural. Nature was very important to her. We would often talk about what we found on our walks, because she would go walking and I would come and visit, and she'd just quietly, put something out and go, found that down by the river. Things like that, and just these little statements. Like, I just found that, and we both would be like, "That's gorgeous, this is wonderful," And then it would be like, there was never like, "What am I going to do with this?" No, it existed because it was inspirational, it was beautiful, it was a singularity, but it always had the potential to be turned into something also. So it's like her cabinet over there that you brought down, which I think is brilliant, is all of those things were collected here, there, maybe an antique shop on occasion, a little thrift store, something. She would get these because they caught her eye. They were raw material, but at the same time, that whole cabinet it's not an assemblage, it's an arrangement. And her arrangements were always in flux, but they were carefully considered. It wasn't just like, everything in that case was placed where it is because that's where it belonged at that moment.
Absolutely.
And that's the type of person she was. I think some of these things she probably sat there and looked at for, who knows, hours, days, a week, and then said, this goes here. That's the type of person she was.
I once said to her, when I was young, I was briefly into the occult, and then I became somewhat bored with that. And I said to her, I said, this really, I was in her studio, and I said, this really often makes me think of witchcraft. And she smiled, and she said, it's been said before. And then she said, but I don't need to be a witch, she said, because I'm an artist. I will never forget that as long as I live.
I can absolutely see Mom saying that. That's absolutely perfect.
Right.
And it makes this thread that we're on now makes me feel like, diving just a little bit into the Upper Peninsula, northern Michigan, where she was born and raised, is so super relevant right now. I mean, it was the three older daughters, and then my understanding is there were 5 years, and then it was Mom was born. So those three siblings.
Gap was significant too.
Growing
up, we knew that Mom had 3 older sisters. But I jokingly say it's kind of sad, but if I passed one of them on the street, I wouldn't have known who they were because Mom just didn't have that relationship with them. And therefore we didn't get carried along to meet them either.
Absolutely. And her parents were the offspring of immigrants. And that's that very sort of like tough first generation, and they built a business, the Ekola brothers, potatoes and other farm in general. He
had a huge chicken coop, 5 stories that my grandfather built himself.
She would tell that story.
Yes.
And also the tooth story of him going to the dentist and not having Novocaine and how stoic he was.
Oh, yes.
That was an interesting one that she related. So
she said the dentist was white as a sheet. She brought her father in, and after a few minutes, the dentist came out, and he was white as a sheet. And he said, your father's mouth is in bad shape. And he said, and I have to use some kind of Novocaine or something. And Marlene just shook her head and she said, he's an old Finn, you won't.
It won't work.
You won't win.
It's not going to happen. You're just going to have to muddle through.
That is such a perfect story of who they were and the life
Said
they
it with
lived.
just the tiniest bit of, there was a lot of pleasure in relating that
Oh,
story.
yes.
You understand?
Pride as
lot of
well.
pride.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
And there's certainly a little bit of that in her as well.
Yeah.
That kind
Yeah.
of stoicism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the pride of the Finnish heritage, and like, you know, that hard work that it took to overcome life in the New World. But so she was basically on her own with her favorite dog, and had sort of free reign of the property. I mean, we're talking about acres and acres and woodlands, right? And so she just spent her days just being on the farm in all kinds of ways. And I'm convinced, I don't know if she spoke about this with you guys, but I'm convinced that's where, you know, she was sort of touched by what the natural world and the sort of sacred things and emotions in the natural world were, and that set her on a course.
She revisited that and brought up to me several times of the importance of her childhood and how now she was bringing it up, like she was going to the well and bringing all of this old stuff back up for her to use as new material.
Well, it seems to me it's that combination of, you know, spending all that time in the outdoors, in the forest, and paying attention to the trees and the lichen and the bark and things like that. And then also Taavamina, the grandmother, her grandmother, our great-grandmother, and who was basically a sort of an old-time healer of sorts. And so there was that spiritual side of her grandmother, and you marry that with the natural elements, and to me, that's what infuses a lot of what we see in her work.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
There was one thing about her that I was thinking of today that I just, it was constant, but I had kind of forgotten. It was so part of who Marlene was. She really was an orator. If you ever saw, well, you saw her give talks.
You know, if I did, I don't remember it, which is one of the crying shames of my life, right? I mean, I would have.
You were a kid. I mean, I'm an adult, and so and I'm used to artists speaking about their work. But Marlene was an orator, and she had a way of standing, and she would gently rock, and she would get everyone's attention because she spoke very clearly, but softly, sometimes with a strong emphasis. And she liked that. She liked that performing, and it was part of the poetry.
So that everybody was sort of like leaning in to hear.
She was quiet enough that, you, as I said one time, you had to pay attention to her, or you would miss something.
Yeah, so and she was tall, and she was imposing. And she
Typically
had
dressed in black.
That was right.
Yes.
That was and the fabulous large glasses.
It's like,
And you always saw her that with hair pulled back, black, big glasses, you know. If someone had just done a line drawing, you'd go, that's her.
Yeah.
and if she couldn't be composed and have a composed thing that worked correctly, she'd pull the plug.
Yeah.
She did not, she did not like, it had to be right or she wouldn't do it. And she would give people what for when they were, I remember a couple of times.
Really? Wow.
She respected professionalism, and she really, really disliked it when something was not managed professionally. It was not good.
Yeah, she had a very deep, like an abiding respect and appreciation for excellence. And you could see that in everything that she did, all her conversations.
She was, I don't want to ever use the word perfectionist, but she was precise, and she thought everything out very carefully before she ever opened her mouth or ever placed anything. Or, great consideration to everything.
But there are some of her pieces that I do feel there's that perfectionist bent to it. Some of the, one of the ones on the wall that's the stone tied with the yarn around it. And if you go up close and look at that, I mean, every thread on the yarn going around the stone is perfectly and beautifully,
Oh, yeah.
precisely drawn.
Yes.
So there's definitely that side to her.
Yeah, but as we know, you cannot achieve perfection. So she may have been trying to, and
Yes.
I'm sure that might have been one of her secret goals. But no, I just, precise, I think, is the proper.
Yes,
So-
absolutely.
So,
She had this one work of art that I know was very important to her, and you mentioned it, and it was the nest. And she made this nest as a commission for an old friend when you lived in Katona, and this friend lived in Westchester County, and I'm trying to remember what town it was. So she made this nest, and it was this big.
Yeah.
It was sheet.
it was a
on
tour de
sheet.
force, for sure.
And it was incredible. It was spectacular. And she wrapped it up, and then I drove it to New York and delivered it.
Uh-huh.
And then the lady, her friend, I wish I could remember her name, she had a frame down there. But she did not like letting go of that piece, so she made another one. There too. She made one for herself, and it was just as spectacular
nest,
as the first one. And then she asked me to frame it. And I did it Marlene style. I had poplar cut to have the right shape. It had to be very, very severe and streamlined. And then the poplar was just painted white. And I said to her, this is a very special finish that I put on this frame. It is primer from a spray can so that you can touch it up whenever you want. Just put a cardboard on the face and
Well, that particular piece, it obviously it held a place of importance in my mother's soul.
Right.
It was in the living room of the house in Bath that they had right up until the very end. It hung prominently in the living room, and then for the last year or so of my mother's life, when her health was failing, and we had to put her into a
Assisted living.
Yeah, assisted living facility to help care for her. The one thing that we made sure we brought over was the nest.
And for people, we know what it looks like, but for people who are watching us, we call it a nest, but really it was a vortex.
Yeah.
It was looking down into a nest, and there were all of these straws in a swirling vortex that got darker as you looked into it. So it was a
And
mesmerizing
floating
piece of
on
work.
this white. I mean,
Yeah.
so it was like, and centered, so, I mean, you were just right, pulled right into it.
Wow.
But that's the type of precision that she could achieve.
Yeah, right.
That's why I'm thrilled that as part of the show that we have here, we do have some of the drawings that she's done. And when I look at those drawings, I'm not sure who the best person is to talk about this part, because the drawings themselves are definitely more from the female aspect of her thought, and that's something that I never really thought about all that much when we were growing up and so on. And as we were preparing for this talk, I realized that Mom raised 3 sons. I wonder what it would have been like if she had a daughter.
I know. No, I've thought that.
How would,
for sure.
because we were raised to be independent, and I don't really think that we ever thought of things as, I don't want to be too old-fashioned, but, women's work, man's work, that type of thing. It was just work. It was just things that needed to be done.
Nothing was gendered in any way.
Right.
I think that we were. Do you remember the Carpenters story? My recollection is that the 3 of us, Carl, who's off in Chicago, if he's watching, hi Carl, and you and I were watching television. Mom was in the room, and the Carpenters, that 70s glamour act, right, came on, and again, I could have this all wrong, but this is what's lodged in my memory. Behind the singer and her husband, I assume, or whatever, was a drummer. The drummer was female, and one of us, I don't remember who it was, it might have been me, said, "Girls can't be drummers. There's a girl drummer. Girls can't be drummers."
What made you say that, Adam?
I bet your mother responded.
That was yes. We were introduced to feminism at that point. Yes.
Yeah. Your mother, when we would have talks, there was a admiration for what strong women can do always
Yes.
was part of her foundation. You know, not only what she could do, but other women.
Yes, yes. I mean, Mom was in the first generation of feminists, you know, and I don't know to what extent. You know, again, this is one of those questions, you know, that you know, maybe you guys can enlighten us, but I don't know to what extent she sort of felt like an activist in terms of feminism, but I think that I'm sure that she considers herself a feminist, and was, you know, all there and a part of that movement of women accomplishing.
And I think she also had a great sense of equality. Like, if you can do it, it doesn't matter whether you're male, female, whatever. You can do this. So I don't think she was, you know, rabid in any way in feminism. I think she was equal.
Yeah.
In every respect.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Absolutely.
There was one really interesting thing that I noticed over the years was really important, and it was really important to Marlene's foundation, and that was her partner. Clarence, she found the right guy.
She did.
And they were, he had his own ambitions, and they staked out their territories. And one of them was keeping everything running and the money part, and that was Clarence. And also Clarence had his business, which I used several times because
Dad's print shop.
his printing was really good.
Yeah.
It was really high quality. So when Marlene would have an exhibit, Clarence would be incredibly happy,
Yeah.
really happy. He would be glowing. He was so proud of Marlene.
Well, and she said to me one time, she said, I wouldn't be able to do this without Clarence at all.
And that is very true.
Yeah,
It is
so,
true.
I mean, because he gave her the freedom to be completely herself and have her, you know, her studio was a temple, if you will. It was a sanctuary. You had to be invited in. You never, ever came uninvited. You made an appointment. If you knocked at the door unannounced, you could stand there until you know what froze over. Because you weren't getting in. So that was, you know, you had to respect that was a sacred space, and she was not to be interrupted if she was in something. So you made sure that you were welcome before you even thought of getting in the car and heading over. So.
Yeah, I mean, how many artists are so fortunate as to just have, like, you know, the path sort of open up, and then you have the artistic freedom for your career.
Right.
Make of it as you will. I know that's fantastic.
I'm somewhat envious of Marlene in the way in the way that she ended her life, because as I was working in the studio, as we were picking up the studio, I saw that as she declined, she always reserved the right to take apart work and redo it. And so she considered the entire space her vocabulary. So she would take apart work, and at a certain point, she lost her ability to draw and do really fine work. So she would rearrange things, and that became her work. And I thought to myself, what a great situation to have for yourself as you're aging and changing. And in decline, she was in this zone of safety. And as long as she was there, she was okay. And I think to myself, you know, as I get older, it might be nice to have that zone of safety where I can, you know, decline gradually in my place.
That's kind of the way I envisioned it also. It's just the last couple of years of her life as she, you know, her faculty started going a little bit, and you know, and probably losing the ability to create new art. but to be in a space in her studio where she's surrounded by all these things that she created over 50 years, you know,
Yeah.
and just to be able to be in that space. And I think that's all she wanted, was just, you know, literally go down there, you know, have her cup of coffee, walk down to the studio, and just be in her space for hours.
Coffee was very
Yes,
important.
coffee.
Yes.
We had our rituals. Every time we got together, there must be coffee.
Yeah, and what a studio, right? I mean, that was,
Her
oh my
space
gosh.
was the most enviable artist space.
It was lovely.
For the viewers who have never seen it,
Yeah.
I'll just describe it. It was an enormous room that had once been an Oddfellows Hall above the Rennie's department store in Bath on Front Street. And you would go through a door into a small room where there was a bathroom adjoining. Then you would go down a hallway, which was lined with art, and then you'd walk into this enormous room
Enormous.
with huge windows and high ceiling.
Yeah.
And the ceiling was tin.
Yeah.
It was this elaborate
Very
tin
ornate.
ceiling.
With a large skylight.
Right,
Yeah.
and everything else in the room was white.
Yes. And the other thing
White.
about it was the windows were not at a low setting. They were high.
Yeah.
So you had all this fabulous wall space plus all
Yeah.
the light.
And
So
no one
Yes.
could see it.
primo.
Right.
Yeah. Very private, yes. Yeah. And, you know, it was just an
Yeah.
absolutely wonderful space and so much floor space. I mean, here you had this huge open space, but all of these arrangements would be, there'd be something, you know, maybe 5, 6, 7 feet long in the middle of the room.
Right.
You know,
Right.
with these.
Stones.
One of the things, because of your mother's love of words and text and things, she would cover bowls in
Yes.
text.
Yes.
And so that would be sitting there with something completely unrelated sitting in it that just, once the two were together, it was like, hello, we're
Yes.
meant to be there.
Yes.
You know?
Toss up the white books.
Oh, yeah. When I was getting ready for my thesis exhibition, and I was doing a kind of a riff on Cabinet of Curiosities. I did all of my assemblages under Victorian glass domes and things. And I had a table set up, and I sat with Marlene and I said, I've got a problem. Everything is on the same level. Looks terrible. I need to elevate some of these. I need to have some, you know, a little dynamic tension going on. And all she did was she said, take those. And she pointed. And she had assembled 2 stacks of antique books that were all glued together and all painted white and slightly askew. So they had, just like they'd been placed down, froze in place, and then were white. And she says, you can borrow those. And of course, primo. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Elevated everything, made my show look absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
But it was just, you know, not like scratch your head, nothing, just instantly take those. Just like fell right into place because she was so familiar with what I was doing. She knew exactly what I needed. So bingo. Yeah.
And I remember in the house in Bath, she had one of those that she used as like a side table.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was gorgeous.
I actually sometimes, they were used to hold the coffee. So,
But it's just things, you know, we took that, you know, type of thing, being in the house, just sort of for granted, I guess. It was there, you know. I remember for Christmas, at some point, we stopped having Christmas trees, and we had a long, bare birch tree branch. And then she would string white lights around it. And then maybe at the bottom of it, she'd put a pile of stones. And that was our
Marlene.
that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
and that was our Christmas tree.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, that was fine. That's, you know, that was okay.
Yeah.
I guess it helped us, me, to sort of think outside the box in terms of like,
Yeah.
it doesn't, not, you know, just because somebody else has said that this is the tradition.
No.
You can tweak that and you can make
Yeah.
it your own. Yeah.
I have to say, I got the very distinct impression from Marlene that she enjoyed raising 3 boys.
Oh, really?
I think it was always there. She frequently would smile if she referred to any of you. She really did. I think it was perfect for her being an artist and raising 3 boys. I think that was a good Because I used to say...
That's so interesting. Yeah.
You know, I used to say to her, how did you do things and raise kids too? And, you know.
Well, I mean, as you know, one of the kids, you know, of course, the level of freedom that we were accorded,
Yes.
you know, was wonderful, and there's a utilitarian purpose to that freedom, but I also feel like, you know, that was a great way to sort of set us on course in life. You know, that was just a good thing for us to have.
When you talk about that, one thing that comes to my mind is you know, years ago when we were living in New York, and you know, the company that my father was working for was thinking about moving down to New Orleans, relocating, and so we went down, the three of us, my mother, father, and myself, went down to New Orleans to check it out. So I couldn't have been more than 14, and maybe I was even younger than that. And so my father is going to and checking out the business, and my mother's doing whatever she was doing, and she basically handed me a map of the French Quarter and said, knock yourself out. And so I spent the day, you know, what other mother would say to their 14-year-old kid, you know,
Right, yeah.
all right, we'll see you. You know, but it was sort of empowering, you know, to think that, you know, I had the tools to, you know, go around and explore on my own, and there was never a sense of like danger involved with it. And obviously, it's not that they were just throwing me to the wolves. They, you know, had some sense of what was happening, and could reel me back in if needed. But just that sense of freedom that you're talking about, that was great.
Yeah.
Well, I think she had the balance pretty well because, you know, what is the message you send to your kids if you live for them? You live for yourself, and they come along with you, and you give the appropriate amount of attention, but you don't give up your own life.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that she successfully did that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And another little thing, just has nothing to do with much of anything, but we would have lunch periodically at her house on High Street, and it was always extraordinarily simple, but she made it so elegant in its simplicity, and the house was always minimal, but at the same time, I looked at it one time and I'm just going, one more object would ruin this. Again, that perfect control of so many things. And it comes down to even like, okay, we're having blueberries, we're having a little salad, we've got some nice yogurt, a little bit of coffee, and you know, we're good to go. That was it, perfect, you know. And it's like, anybody else's house, I would have gone, really? But when she served it, it was like, okay, you know, we're in the Four Seasons, this, you know, great food, you know, the whole thing. She knew how to orchestrate.
Well, she worked with these objects that, you know, she discovered, and just in the act of discovering them, they became very significant, very meaningful. And so she worked with them for her whole life in different ways. You know, some of them became incorporated into the household, so they were part of her daily living, and some of them became part of the work. It's almost like you could feel that there was sort of like a hierarchy that they would sort of like go through in her evaluation of them. You know, I could sort of imagine her thinking, you know, in that piece over there, you know, this you know, tin number 9 with the curl on the stroke, like that reaches a certain level. That needs to be in something that I build.
Right. One day I saw her and she was ecstatic because she had found something incredible and she wanted to show it to me. And it was books in Braille.
Yeah.
So she had pages and pages and pages of Braille.
Yeah.
And she was over the moon about it. And that appeared in her work for a long time.
I was going to say several
treatments because she loved words and language and books. They were sacred. And the Braille just
This
was
just
perfect.
takes it
Yeah.
to another level. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, you're right, the written word, she was always fascinated with the written word, but now it's not necessarily the written word, it's a textile
Yeah.
word,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So it just,
Yeah.
it amps that whole, you know,
Yeah.
mystery of language, just another notch.
Yeah, it's the symbolic. You know, that's one of the things that you know, it's just a layer upon layer upon layer of symbolic work that my mom was you know, really trying to explore, and you could just get that sense that she was her whole life, or this is my interpretation, and this is totally, Roger, like one of the questions I really wanted to put to you guys is how you sort of made sense, how you tried to understand all the symbolic work that my mom was bringing to it. You know, for me, it began to feel like, you know, that there was never a point, like mom was phobic about any, like if someone would say, well, what does that, you know, nest mean in that piece? It means what you want it to mean, right? Yeah, okay, right. But I think that, you know, like she reveled and yet was frustrated maybe at the same time by all the layers of decoding that needed to happen to try and get at some kind of essential essence, right? And I don't have any more to say about it than that, but I'm wondering if, yeah.
The thing that we often talk about, or what I gathered, and we both worked this way, is process is personal. When you bring things together, how they go together, that's my little secret. I'm not broadcasting. I want to show you where this goes.
Yeah.
Where my process is mine, I will show you the result.
Yeah.
And she was very much that way. Not, you know, that's why, like, even her titles, there's a mystery that you look at that and you start to go, makes you think, you know.
Yeah.
But it's not saying, you know, bird's nest.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not saying this is A, or I'm feeling this, or, you know, you'd never see a piece of work and then a large written explanation ever. No. Not that kind. So,
Yeah,
that's part of what.
And she would even talk about the titles to her pieces coming to her from dreams.
Yeah,
in some
right,
sense.
right.
And I know, you know, that made me think of when we were kids. Mom went to, I don't know if you call them classes, meetings, whatever, Jungian philosophy type meetings. And I don't know anything about that, but you know, I know there's some aspect of you know, interpreting dreams and whatnot, and I don't know if she ever, you know, discussed that with you.
Once in a while, she did tell me about a dream. She may have told me about a dream several times, but the one I remember, and I just remembered it today, she had a dream where she was saving books from a fire or something. Books. She said, "I'm exhausted. I've been saving books all night." She had been rescuing tomes from some disaster or from something, and she said they just kept coming and coming, and I couldn't stop. And
Oh, that's so interesting.
so she did. She was a dreamer. She had dreams.
Yeah.
Was there ever the sense that she was trying to interpret those dreams in you know, the work that she created?
Well, if she interpreted everything Marlene did was laced with humor. So she would say something humorous or something wry about what maybe she was supposed to be doing.
I think she had a lot of different filters too. It's like you start with something and it gets filtered, and then that gets filtered, and then again to, you know, like a distillation of something to get down to that final essence. And she did. And one of the things I said to her, we had a friend who had an antique shop that was full of amazing things, and she did like to go there. She said, "I'm not going to go down there too often. I don't want his ideas to start to be percolating up in my work." She said, I've gone down there. I go down there once in a while, and that's it. I'm done. She did have filters. She did control the influences, and she was fiercely protective of her work and very much wanted it to be hers. And she didn't want
unconsciously to take up other people's.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I want to just bounce back quickly to the dreams. I do feel like that dream you just described, like that seems so like fundamental for the way Mom viewed her work. I mean, so much of her work, again, as I was trying to process things, leading up to tonight, so many of her pieces, sort of like beckon back to the past and like the knowledge and the wisdom and, sort of the accomplishments of the past and try and like save them, like bring them into a form that people can sort of recognize and understand all that ancestors have done. I just think there's this dialogue with the past and that's ongoing in her work, and in a way that's just like that dream. That it's, if I don't do this, it's going to be lost.
Right.
Yeah, right. An archivist of sorts.
Yeah.
And the other thing too with her assemblages is we both, and this is where we related when I was in the master's program, you take an object, you make it yours by maybe painting it or laying on the text or something, but at the same time, you haven't obliterated what the original thing is.
Yeah.
You've made it your own, you've enhanced it, if you will. You've placed it in the space that you want it to be in, but it still allows you to see what it was in the first place, which kind of goes back to that archiving of things. It's not losing its original essence, it's being enhanced, manipulated, and used as a device.
Yeah. I just think that Mom felt like there was so much meaning in what the original object was, that she's able to comment on it, but there's an essence in there that she absolutely wants to preserve.
Yeah. And make it her own simultaneously.
Yes.
That's the trick of that balancing act.
Yeah.
Keeping the original but making it yours.
So one of the things that she enjoyed was making works that were fragile. And so she would sometimes say, what headaches am I creating for people by making these incredibly fragile objects? And I was very turned on by that, by the fragility of them. And she kept making fragile objects. And I remember when you said that her studio was going to be broken up, I thought, this is going to be a challenge. The boxing involved in packing those things up, every one was a different problem. And it was really... and I was just determined that not a feather, not a hair, not a branch.
Well, you did a fabulous job. Yeah, for sure.
I wanted to change the subject for just a second and maybe talk about the journals that Mom did.
Yeah.
Because we were looking, so my mother had, over the course of many years, had taken old, not necessarily books, but blank books, handmade paper, things like that, that were bound, and used them as journals. And she would do different images. I don't know if they were like a sketch of ideas that would become pieces later on, or if they were just what she was feeling in the moment. But I don't know what she shared with you guys about the journals in terms of was that something that she was kind of rigorous about doing consistently, or was that just something where today I'm going to work on the journal as opposed to working on some of these pieces that are in the studio? Where do those fall in her
I think a
scope?
lot of that was, it came out when it had to come out. So there might have been periods, like, I'm thinking here that one time I visited her and she says, I've just been writing and writing. And it was just, I couldn't stop at that point. So I think it was not like, again, no discipline. I will write an hour today, I will write an hour tomorrow. No, I think, when the floodgate opened, it's like, okay, we are at it, and we're going to just keep going until it dries up, and then we stop and go and do something else. And then when well is filled up again, here we go. So
And
I
it
think
seems
it went
like,
that way.
yeah, and it seems like the journals sort of morphed from, like you said, just written observations that she might spend some time, and she wrote a lot of poetry over the
Yeah.
years as well, to kind of the visual journals, like the one that we have behind us there, where to me, each page is its own work of art.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it is, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
That
Yeah.
was her.
Each one of those could exist separately, but, again, seeing it as a unit,
Yeah.
a whole,
Absolutely.
gives it a different perspective.
Yeah, I do feel like the journals are a whole different area of my mom's work, and I think that there's a lot of understanding that we need to bring to them to kind of fully grasp that.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's interesting about the journals when you look through them is that there are some, she has written out some things, which is what you don't get from the pieces, right?
Right.
That's all
Yeah.
visual and it's all,
Yeah.
whatever it means to you. But with the journals, there are some clues, right? Because she has written things
Yeah.
out specifically to
And,
sort of.
and again, not being privy to how her process worked, I don't know which came first, chicken, egg,
Right.
where is this in her mental arrangement of how her work came
Well,
to be.
what I do remember is that and you may remember this verb, Alex, from growing up. She would journal. She called it her journaling, and that was something that was sort of a discipline for her, at least during that era, where every morning she would usually leave the house and go like to a cafe or the library or someplace fairly public. And this was how she, with a cup of coffee and just, spiral bound notebook or something, she would, just express in words, in sketches, in colors, whatever sort of was germane to starting her day. And that would be an hour or two, and then she would go to whatever was serving as her studio and work. And that journaling was really critical. And I'm sure there's a through line here from that kind of process to what finally ended up in these beautiful, huge books that have been just laid. I mean, these books won't even close practically because they're so layered with paint and glued in content. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the early stuff was probably her discipline so that she could carry through to be able to do those things because, I've tried journaling. It doesn't work. It's one of those, you have to have a certain mental set for being able to handle that and be consistent, not, you're flipping through and then all of a sudden that day where everything's blank and remains blank for the rest of your life. But anyway, so I think that was probably, again, your mother was disciplined, so
yes,
And
she could pull that off.
And I can even remember coming across some things where she took several trips to Finland, which of course is where her grandparents, our great-grandparents, were emigrated from. And there were journals that she kept from there also, and it was you could almost literally see her on a park bench or something like that. And sketching, a birch tree that's in front of her, and then making notations that, in the margins about whatever she was thinking about. But she carried that process over there too.
And she really loved the natural environment over there. She would talk about the nature in Finland quite a bit,
Absolutely.
and show me pictures sometimes.
Yeah,
Quite impressive, actually.
Yeah, it was that line back to the Taormina ancestors. I mean, Mom really felt. I mean, Taormina was her maternal grandmother, right? I mean, Mom felt like there was, speaking of feminism, Mom felt like there was this line of folk healers / shamans who were women, and I think that she saw herself in that line. And so by going back to Finland, she was tapping into that for sure.
Oh yeah, and she would she made it a point to seek out relatives that had stayed in Finland and not come over to America. And I think she found out that there was a town in Finland called Ekola. Which is her maiden name.
Right.
And of course, she had any number of cousins that still lived in there. And she would tell of adventures, meeting them. And I remember one where she met with one of the cousins, and I don't know what the circumstance was, but they wound up going out into the back 40 on the farm there and sitting on an anthill and letting the ants crawl all over them. And that was supposed to be like this
Right, I
healing.
remember.
Okay, yeah.
To bring it back to the stories, right? Yeah. So this is still something that, you know, that she got in there and she did it. So,
Wow.
yeah.
And she was always quite happy that she was so well received with her art over there.
Yes.
Also,
Yeah.
that was very
And she-
important to her.
She loved meeting the other artists there, and she loved their work too. That was very stimulating. I got a job, a very strange job. I had to put up an exhibit of photographs in the Finnish embassy in DC. And there were no walls available for me to put the show up. So I had to build stands for the individual items.
Wow.
And I was a nervous wreck. And so I went to your mother and I said, I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to piss off the Finns. I said, here's my design. Do you think they will like it? And she said, I think so. She said, I think it'll work. And she said, but you know it won't work if you hear them making a little sound in the back of their throat. She said, they won't say anything, but they'll make this little sound. And she made it. And she said, then you know you have failed. So that didn't really help me.
No, but Kevin, we have to ask, did you hear that sound?
No, I didn't. I didn't.
Good.
And I don't want to go too off the beam, but the Finnish embassy in DC was the most astonishing building I have ever been in. It just knocked my socks off.
Wow.
It was utterly, utterly modern, and everyone was very, very, very wonderful.
Oh.
And
I remember that show. I went out and bought a jacket just so I could go to that show.
Oh.
But this was, Mom was part of a 3-person exhibit at the Finnish embassy in Washington, D.C.
so you've been at,
Yeah.
I had an event that I just slightly off, but it just talks about who the Finns are. I was being guided there it was the guy who shadowed me there, and they called him the guy who does the lights. But he wasn't. It took me a while to figure out he was actually their security officer. And his job was to make sure that I and my people were safe.
Yeah.
But they were so subtle about it. And then we went out for a break, and it's right across from the Naval Observatory, and all of a sudden, cops appeared everywhere, and traffic was stopped, and 8 black SUVs with blacked out windows drove in formation out of the Naval Observatory and went down the street. And he had just finished telling us about transparency in government. The Finns believe in transparency in government. And all of their doors have glass in them.
Yeah.
And it was Dick Cheney, I don't know, going grocery shopping or something.
Yeah.
And we all looked at him, and he looked at us, and he said, I'm not saying a thing.
Oh, man.
But I remember that show that she had at the embassy. I forget, it was must have been 1980s, 1990s, somewhere in that vicinity. But that was a proud moment. I remember, you know, I remember thinking, you know, never talked about it with Mom from this aspect of it, but I was like, this is pretty cool.
Yes.
You know,
That's
my
very
mother has a
cool.
show at not just, you know, some whatever. This is the Finnish embassy in Washington, D.C. The Finnish ambassador was there. It was a big deal. That
And
was really
Finland
cool.
had presidents that were women,
Yes, absolutely.
right? And they may have had a woman at that time as president.
Yeah.
And you know, no matter how happy your mother would be about something, she's not going to be.
Right.
No,
It would
yeah.
be,
Yep.
Yes.
this is
But inside, she's
inside, yes.
Yeah.
but never on the outside. So, I mean, she was very composed.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think that there were many people in Finland who were really, you know, appreciative and welcoming of, you know, someone who represents the emigre
Yes.
coming back and making a connection with their old world country. And I think that meant a lot to the Finns. I think that they do very much hold in esteem, you know, the Finns who went abroad and accomplished.
You know, think of, you know, Mom and our family was just one example of people that left Finland to come to the U.S. And, you know, that story must have been repeated thousands and thousands of times. And so there's that connection. And then to have somebody come to the U.S., be successful, come back to Finland, and kind of show all that.
Yeah.
I think it was a nice full circle
Right.
for everybody involved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think the Upper Peninsula of Michigan has a special significance of the Finns.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it is very important to
I
them.
haven't been to Finland, but you have. But my idea of what Finland looks like is a lot like what the UP looks like.
Yeah.
Basically, yes.
Yeah, which always kind of cracks me up, because here you have all these people that
I know.
uproot their entire lives to sail across the ocean, because our family came over around 1900 or so. Sail across the ocean, you don't know what you're going to find on the other side, and then you get to somewhere and you say, we want to settle in a land that looks a lot like the one we just left.
Because
And
we're
it's
comfortable.
kind of remote.
Yes,
Exactly
exactly.
remote.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So, but,
There was a lot of her work in Finland.
There was what?
There's a lot of her work.
Yes.
A lot of collectors, a lot of people. She said that she went to see, she sold a piece to a corporate person, and they wanted her to see, it was installed in their boardroom. And she went and she said the framing was magnificent, and it was a large piece, and it was the only thing in the room. So when
Wow.
they had their board meetings, there was her piece right there.
That's a really funny juxtaposition.
Mom meets corporate America.
Yeah,
Well, this was
Or corporate
for the first time.
Corporate
Yeah.
Finland,
Finland. I think it was Finland, but
yeah.
yeah.
But, yeah, I think you're going to have quite a, bit of work on your hands going through all of those journals, because there's so much in there. It's going to take a long, long time to process everything.
Yeah, and we were saying before this started, I mean, that really is some of her most personal work
Right.
in there, where she's, the focus is kind of more on her.
Yeah.
And that's rarely the case with these pieces.
This is for the viewing public. That, I think, even though it can be viewed by the public, is the, real personal reflections.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I just want to see if you actually hit on all the topics. I was going to especially ask about the journals. I think one of the hits of the show, we get asked the most questions about that, but you covered that really well. It's been going about an hour, so I wanted to see if each of you had some final thoughts you wanted to share.
I don't know if I do. I just want to thank you guys so much. I mean, I just think that you are.
I think this was great to have a nice talk.
Yeah, I think this was a welcome thing for us. I mean, I think we're all struggling with the passing of Marlene, and to have a nice discussion about what rooted her art. This has been very helpful for me, I know, without a doubt. And she spoke so fondly of you guys. You just, if you don't know that already, you should.
Thank you.
But just to echo that, first of all, and also, I think as you were saying earlier, Adam, she was always mom, right? And the work was there, and we saw it all the time, but we never really stopped to look at it in any sort of way outside of that's just mom stuff.
Yeah, I don't think we knew how to begin.
Right. Right. So that just doing this tonight, from a selfish standpoint, is nice for me to start thinking about the work in a different way.
Well, maybe we can do a part 2 sometime.
Yeah, totally, exactly.
Because there's still plenty to discuss, I'm
Absolutely.
sure. So.
Absolutely, yeah. The layers are quite deep. Terrific.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, for those of us who didn't know her, this was absolutely enlightening and fascinating.
Fantastic. Yeah. Oh, our pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.